My mother-in-law asked me not to attend her birthday. Then she accused me of disrespecting her in front of the entire family. I've always known that relationships with mothers-in-law require a special kind of finesse. After 4 years of marriage to Michael, I still haven't mastered this particular art. It's not that Margaret and I have open hostility or constant arguments. It's more like a Cold War, surface-level politeness, and smiles at family gatherings, but an underlying tension you could almost touch. Margaret is turning 60 next week, a milestone birthday, a significant date. For the past 2 weeks, I've been feeling increasing anxiety. Large family gatherings have never been a source of joy for me, especially with my husband's family, where I still feel like an outsider despite the wedding ring and nearly 5 years together with Michael. Our story began like many others. We met through mutual friends at a dinner party. Michael wasn't the loudest person in the room. There was something about his quiet confidence that caught my attention immediately. We talked all evening, forgetting about everyone else. Then came the dates, flowers, weekend trips to the coast. I fell in love quickly and deeply. Michael was tender, caring, always attentive to my needs. Our relationship developed rapidly, and within 6 months, we were living together. But with his mother, the connection never formed. During our first meeting, she looked me up and down, slightly pursed her lips, and smiled tightly. I attributed this to the natural wariness of a mother toward her only son's girlfriend. I naively thought we'd find common ground over time. Looking back now, I understand the problem was deeper. Margaret was one of those women for whom a son isn't just a child, but an extension of herself. And any woman near him was perceived as a threat. I remember our wedding planning. What should have been a happy time became a nightmare because of Margaret. She criticized everything. Our venue choice, too pretentious. Our menu, where are the traditional dishes? My dress? In my day, brides chose more modest styles. Our guest list. When Michael and I insisted on our choices, she became offended and didn't speak to her son for a week. Eventually, Michael gave in on several issues to keep the peace. That was the first time I saw this pattern that would follow us for years. His mother would pressure, manipulate, get offended, and her son would yield to avoid upsetting her. After the wedding, we settled into a small apartment downtown. Margaret lived in another part of the city, about a 30-minute drive away. But my mother-in-law quickly found ways to insert herself into our lives. She called Michael several times a day, often coincidentally appeared near his workplace at the end of the day, and invited him to dinners that were impossible to decline. She also constantly reminded him of various family obligations, traditions, birthdays of distant relatives, all supposedly requiring his presence. If Michael refused, she had a way of sighing heavily into the phone that made his hands shake, and he would eventually agree. I tried to establish boundaries. I gently told Michael that we needed more time together, that his mother was too involved in our lives. He agreed, promised to talk to her, but ultimately everything remained the same. I could see how difficult it was for him to stand up to his mother, how afraid he was of disappointing or angering her. Gradually, I began to give in, to yield, to avoid creating additional tension in our relationship. Perhaps that was my biggest mistake. I recall last year's celebration of Margaret's birthday. I baked a cake, spent half a day on it, found a special recipe with raspberry and white chocolate. When we arrived, I proudly took the cake out of its box. Margaret barely glanced at my creation, said she was on a diet and couldn't eat sweets. Then she demonstratively took a piece of store-bought cake that Michael's aunt had brought, smacking her lips and saying, "Now this is real flavor, just like when I was a girl." I stood there with a frozen smile, feeling the blood rush to my face. Michael pretended not to notice, and that was perhaps the most painful part. He was enthusiastically discussing football with his uncle, carefully avoiding looking in my direction, and I stood holding a plate with the untouched cake, feeling so humiliated that I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. There were other episodes, like when I made paella for Michael's birthday, and Margaret spent a long time examining her plate before casually remarking that her son preferred traditional beef stew, not this exotic food. Although I knew for certain that Michael loved paella, he had told me so many times. All these little things accumulated, creating a constant background of tension and mistrust. But I tried to restrain myself, to avoid scenes, hoping the situation would change over time. I didn't want to put Michael in a position where he had to choose between me and his mother. I could see how he struggled, torn between us, and I felt sorry for him. As Margaret's 60th birthday approached, I was considering gift options. I wanted to find something special that might break the ice between us. I eventually chose an elegant silk scarf and a set of luxurious skincare products that Margaret, according to Michael, really loved. The gift cost nearly a third of my monthly salary, but I decided it was worth it. Maybe this gesture would finally mark the beginning of a better relationship between us. One evening, about a week before the birthday, Michael and I were sitting in the kitchen. I was cutting vegetables for a salad, and he was looking at something on his phone. I asked him about plans for his mother's birthday, suggesting we should decide in advance what time to leave and what else to buy besides the main gift. Michael looked up from his phone with an odd expression. He said his mother had called him that afternoon and suggested that I might not come to the party. According to her, there would be many relatives I wasn't familiar with. The atmosphere might be a bit tense due to recent family conflicts, and I might feel uncomfortable. She was supposedly concerned about me, about my well-being. I froze with the knife in my hand. Everything inside me went cold. Not attend my mother-in-law's birthday? This was too much, even for our complicated relationship. I asked Michael if his mother really didn't want to see me at her celebration. He started mumbling something incoherent, that she didn't exactly mean it that way, that she was just concerned about my comfort, knowing how difficult it is for me in large gatherings of unfamiliar people. I could tell from his eyes that he wasn't being entirely honest. Over the years of living together, I had learned to recognize when Michael was hiding something or downplaying it to avoid upsetting me. This usually involved things related to his mother. I put down the knife, wiped my hands, and said I needed to hear this directly from her. I picked up the phone and dialed my mother-in-law's number. Margaret answered after the fourth ring. I asked how she was doing and how the birthday preparations were going. Then I directly asked if it was true that she would prefer not to see me at her party. There was a pause. Then Margaret began speaking in that special tone of hers, seemingly soft, but with distinct steel undertones. She said I had misunderstood. The party would be large, exhausting, with numerous relatives and family conversations. Given our small disagreements in the past, she thought I might be uncomfortable. So if I wanted to skip this event, she would completely understand. Her voice had a perfectly measured blend of concern and condescension. I knew perfectly well this was just a game. She wanted me not to come, but she formulated her desire as if she were thinking of my interests. Typical passive aggression, which is so difficult to expose. I listened to her, feeling a wave of hurt and irritation rising inside me. Her tone, her wording, everything was calculated to maintain the appearance of propriety while making it clear to me I wasn't wanted there. I hadn't even properly formulated a response when she added a phrase that finally clarified everything. It might be better if you don't come. It will be more relaxed, and Michael will find it easier to socialize with relatives he hasn't seen in a long time. That phrase felt like a slap in the face. So it wasn't about my comfort at all, but about me supposedly preventing Michael from fully engaging with his family. As if I were some burden constantly pulling him away from his real family. I thanked my mother-in-law for her concern and said I'd think about her suggestion. My voice sounded level, though inside I was seething with indignation. After this conversation, I sat on the balcony for a long time, staring into the darkness, trying to cope with my emotions. It was late May, and the warm evening air was filled with the scents of blooming trees. Music played somewhere in the distance, laughter could be heard. Normal life continued, while I sat hugging my knees, feeling more alone than ever before. Michael approached several times, asking if everything was okay. I told him word for word my entire conversation with his mother. He frowned, said that Mom probably just expressed herself poorly, and that maybe it really would be better if I skipped this party to avoid creating tension. He promised not to stay late, and suggested we could perhaps watch a movie together afterward. At that moment, I felt incredibly alone. My own husband didn't take my side, didn't defend me. Instead, he suggested I should yield and stay home while he celebrated with his family. And this despite the fact that I was ready to spend a considerable amount on a gift for a woman who didn't even want to see me at her birthday. I didn't make a scene. I just calmly said that if everyone would be more comfortable without me, then of course, I wouldn't go. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about our marriage, how we had reached this point. Michael and I loved each other. We had a lot in common. We were good together. But this constant shadow of his mother poisoned our happiness. I wondered, would this ever change? Would Michael finally grow up and separate from his mother, become truly independent? Or would I have to fight for a place in his heart with a woman who believes she has more rights to him than I do? For the rest of my life? The next morning, I canceled the scarf and skincare products order, deciding I'd find a better use for that money. The birthday was scheduled for Saturday. Michael and I barely discussed the topic in the remaining days. He just said he would go for a short while to congratulate his mother and not offend the relatives. I nodded and said I understood. On the day of the birthday, I woke up early. Michael was still asleep. I quietly got up, prepared breakfast and coffee. When he woke up, we had breakfast together, talking about inconsequential things. We didn't mention the upcoming celebration. Around 3 in the afternoon, Michael started getting ready. I helped him choose a shirt, reminded him not to forget the card we had bought together. As he stood at the door ready to leave, I felt a sudden pang of regret. After all, a 60th birthday is an important date. Maybe I should have forced myself to go. But Michael kissed me on the cheek, said he wouldn't be late, and left. I closed the door behind him and remained alone in the empty apartment. The rest of the day dragged on painfully slowly. I tried to distract myself, cleaned the apartment, went shopping, bought myself a new dress. But my thoughts constantly returned to the birthday party, to what was happening there, what they were talking about, whether they remembered me at all. I spent the evening watching a series I'd been wanting to see, ordered a pizza, opened a bottle of wine, tried not to look at my phone or think about what was happening at the birthday party. It didn't work well. My imagination painted pictures of a joyful family celebration where everyone was laughing, hugging, taking photos. And only I wasn't there, as if I didn't exist in the life of this family. Michael returned around 11 in the evening. He smelled of alcohol, but he wasn't drunk, just slightly tipsy. I asked how the party went. He said everything was good, his mother was happy, relatives sent their regards. I asked if anyone had inquired about the reason for my absence. Michael hesitated, then said a couple of people had asked, but he explained that I wasn't feeling well. This was a lie, and we both knew it. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he avoided my gaze, but I didn't push. Something inside told me he wasn't being completely truthful, but I was too emotionally drained to press for the truth. We went to bed, and I lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how strange life is. Here I am, married for 4 years, but I still haven't become part of my husband's family. On Tuesday, as I was returning from work, I received a call from Jennifer, the wife of Michael's cousin. We weren't close, but we always got along well at family gatherings. She was one of the few of my husband's relatives who treated me without prejudice. She asked how I was doing, and then suddenly said something that turned everything upside down. "Listen, what happened? Everyone was discussing how you snubbed Michael's mom at her birthday." I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, not believing my ears. Jennifer continued talking, clearly not understanding the effect her words were having. According to her, at the party, everyone was wondering why I hadn't come. Margaret, it turned out, had told everyone how she had personally called to invite me, how she wanted to see the whole family together for her birthday. And then, when asked about my absence, she would sigh sadly and say, "I guess she had more important things to do than my birthday." Jennifer described the atmosphere at the party as strange. Many guests were whispering, discussing my absence. Some even approached Michael with sympathy, saying how difficult it must be for him with such a disrespectful wife. And Margaret accepted these condolences with the air of a martyr, stoically bearing the blows of fate. I listened to Jennifer, and I literally saw red with indignation. My mother-in-law hadn't just asked me not to come. She had used this to portray me in a bad light in front of the entire family. And Michael? Had he also participated in this performance? Or had he just cowardly remained silent when his mother was disparaging me? Jennifer said she was calling me because the whole situation seemed strange to her. She knew me not as a troublemaker, but as a reasonable and polite person. And now, She wanted to hear my version of events. I told her everything honestly, about how my mother-in-law had asked me not to come, about how Michael hadn't stood up for me, about how I had been feeling these past few days. When I finished, she said she now understood a lot and that she was very sorry about what had happened. And then she added that, unfortunately, this wasn't the first time Margaret had behaved this way. On the way home, I was overwhelmed with emotions, hurt, anger, disappointment, but strongest of all was the feeling of betrayal. I felt betrayed twice, first by my mother-in-law, who had deliberately set me up, and then by my husband, who had allowed it to happen, who hadn't defended me, hadn't told the truth, but instead had supported his mother's lie. He came home from work around 7. I met him in the kitchen, not even trying to hide my state. Michael immediately realized something was wrong and cautiously asked what had happened. I told him about Jennifer's call and what had apparently happened at the birthday party. With each word I spoke, he frowned more deeply. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, staring at the table. Finally, he looked up and said that perhaps Jennifer had misunderstood or exaggerated. His mother had never said anything bad about me, just expressed regret that I couldn't come. I asked him directly, did he know that everyone was being told I had ignored the invitation? He hesitated again, then uttered a phrase that devastated me. Mom probably misunderstood your conversation. She was sure she had invited you. I couldn't believe my ears. He had been right there when I was talking to his mother on the phone. He had heard our conversation. He definitely knew she had asked me not to come. And now he was pretending that conversation hadn't happened? That's when I decided to go all the way. I said I wanted to talk to his mother and clarify the situation. Michael started trying to dissuade me, claiming it would only exacerbate the conflict. But I was adamant. I picked up the phone and dialed my mother-in-law's number. Margaret answered almost immediately. I got straight to the point. I asked why she had told everyone I had ignored her invitation when in fact she herself had asked me not to come. There was a pause on the other end. Then my mother-in-law began speaking in the same soft but steely tone. She said I had completely misunderstood. She had never asked me not to come, but merely suggested that option if I would feel uncomfortable. She had expected me to show respect and still come to congratulate her on her birthday, or at least call that day. I watched Michael's reaction. He was sitting across from me, and I had deliberately put the phone on speaker so he could hear every word. He was looking somewhere to the side, avoiding my gaze. It was obvious how uncomfortable he felt, how he didn't know whose side to take. I was so shocked by this blatant lie that for a moment I was speechless. And then, my voice no longer under control, I reminded her of her own words. It might be better if you don't come. It will be more relaxed. She replied that I was taking phrases out of context and misinterpreting them. And then she added a phrase that finally finished me off. You could have at least called. That's the minimum courtesy you could have shown. I looked at Michael, who was sitting nearby and had heard the entire conversation. He looked lost and unhappy, but made not the slightest attempt to intervene. He didn't say, Mom, we both remember that you asked Emma not to come. He didn't defend me, didn't support me, and at that moment, I realized I was alone in this battle, that the husband I had trusted, whom I had loved, wouldn't be there for me in a difficult moment. I ended the call with a short, "Sorry to have bothered you," and hung up. Silence fell. Michael tried to say something, but I raised my hand, stopping him. I needed to be alone and think everything through. I left the apartment and wandered the evening streets for a long time, trying to process everything that had happened. When I returned home, it was already late, around 11. Michael was waiting for me in the kitchen, sitting with an untouched cup of tea. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red as if he had been crying. I sat across from him, ready to continue the conversation. He spoke first. He said that all this time he had been trying to understand himself, his feelings. That it was hard for him to be caught between two fires, his mother and his wife. That he loved us both and didn't want to lose either of us. I asked if he understood that his mother was deliberately turning the entire family against me, that she had lied about the birthday situation to make me look like a bad daughter-in-law. He nodded, but immediately added that he didn't think his mom did it intentionally. Maybe she just misunderstood the situation. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. I listened to him and couldn't believe my ears. After everything that had happened, he was still making excuses for her, still looking for logical justifications for her actions, instead of acknowledging the obvious. His mother was consciously manipulating him, me, the entire family. I told him all this directly, without shouting or hysterics, just stating facts. I said I was tired of being a punching bag for his mother, tired of my own husband being unable to protect me from unfair accusations, that I needed a partner I could rely on, who would be there for me, for better or worse, as we had vowed to each other at our wedding. By morning, I had made a decision. At breakfast, I told Michael I wanted to go to my parents for a few days to think everything over. He nodded, not trying to dissuade me. Maybe he also understood that we needed a pause, that things couldn't continue this way. My parents lived in a neighboring town about a 2-hour drive away. I called my mom, told her I was coming, packed my things, and left that same day. My parents' home welcomed me with warmth and care. Mom immediately noticed something was wrong, but didn't ask questions. She just hugged me, made my favorite mint tea, and gave me the space to decide when I would be ready to talk. In the evening, sitting with Mom in the kitchen over tea, I finally broke down and told her the whole story. She listened attentively, without interrupting. When I finished, she sighed and said that unfortunately, such situations weren't rare. Mothers-in-law often jealously guard their sons from their wives, especially if the son was an only child. Like Michael, she reminded me of one important thing. Marriage isn't just a union of two people, it's also the intertwining of two families, two histories, two models of relationships. And sometimes, no matter how much people love each other, these differences can be insurmountable. I asked Mom what I should do next. She replied that she couldn't decide for me, but advised me to think carefully about whether Michael was ready to truly build his own family or whether he would always remain a mama's boy. And she said one more important thing. To remain silent in such a situation means to agree with injustice. I spent 3 days at my parents' home. Michael called every evening, asking how I was when I would come back. I gave evasive answers. I needed to decide how to live from now on, and this decision wasn't easy. I loved Michael. We had lived together for 5 years. We had plans, dreams, a shared future. But I also understood that I couldn't be happy in a relationship where I wasn't protected, where my feelings and my truth weren't as important as my mother-in-law's peace of mind. On the fourth day, I received a call from Jennifer. She told me that after our conversation, she had also talked with several relatives and found out that the situation was indeed exactly as I had suspected. Margaret had been deliberately creating a negative impression of me, and not just at the birthday party. She regularly complained to relatives about how cold and arrogant I was, how I didn't respect family traditions. Yet to my face, she was always outwardly polite, classic passive aggression. This call was the last straw for me. I decided I would no longer remain silent. I gathered my things, said goodbye to my parents, and returned home. Michael met me warily, evidently not knowing what to expect. I suggested we sit down and have a serious talk. I told him everything I had learned from Jennifer. I said I could no longer and would not want to live in a situation where my mother-in-law manipulated me and disparaged me behind my back, and he was unable to protect his wife. I laid it on the line. Either we solve this problem together and he finally takes a clear position, or I see no point in continuing our marriage. Michael looked shocked. He began saying that he loved me, that he didn't want to destroy our family. But when I asked if he was ready to openly take my side in the conflict with his mother, he again started mumbling something about not wanting to choose between us and break off relations with his parents. "Michael," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "no one is asking you to break off relations with your mother. Just stop letting her control you and our life. Stop remaining silent when she lies about me. Be a man, not a mama's boy." These words struck a nerve. For the first time, I saw something new in his eyes. Not submission, not fear, but determination. He silently stood up, took his phone, and dialed his mother's number. What happened next forever changed our relationship. Michael simply told his mother that he knew the truth about the birthday situation and about how she had been turning relatives against me for years. That he loved her and always would, but he would no longer allow her to interfere in his family life. That if she wanted to see him happy, she needed to accept his choice and his wife. I don't know what Margaret replied. I went out onto the balcony to give them privacy to talk. When I returned, Michael was sitting on the couch, his face in his hands. I sat down beside him, hugged him. He turned to me and said, "I'm sorry. I should have done this a long time ago." At that moment, I realized that perhaps not all was lost, that perhaps our marriage could still be saved, that Michael had finally begun to grow up, to emerge from under his mother's influence, and to become a truly independent person. 3 months have passed since then. Michael and I have talked a lot, gone to a family therapist, learned to rebuild boundaries and trust each other again. I still don't communicate with his parents. We agreed that first we need to strengthen our own union. Michael sees them without me, and I have no objection to that. The main thing is that he has now clearly set boundaries and doesn't allow his mother to interfere in our life or speak badly about me. I don't know what will happen next with our marriage. Perhaps we'll be able to overcome this crisis and emerge from it stronger. Or perhaps at some point, I'll realize that some wounds are too deep to heal completely. But one thing I know for sure: to remain silent means to agree. And sometimes it's worth risking everything to defend your truth and your dignity. Even if there's a chance of losing your family, losing yourself costs much more.